Lytudiep, hello, dear friends. Love mixed with friendship and giving up or try to continue. What will the feeling be like? Today we continue to come to the emotional story when a third person appears in your love. James returned to his hometown after many years away. His heart filled with a mixture of nostalgia and unease. Though he had established a solid career in the city, returning to this place, the one that had witnessed so many of his youthful memories, stirred something deep within him. He didn't just return for the canal project. There was another reason that drew him back, his longing to see Diep again, the girl who had once captured his heart. Despite the years apart, the memories of their time together had never truly faded. He had tried to move on, but no matter how much time passed, the feelings for her lingered. When James had left for the city, he and Diep had made promises to each other, talking about a future together, one where their love would endure. But when he left, she stayed behind, and time stretched between them. She couldn't wait forever, and as the years passed, their love began to wither away. James didn't blame her, but as he saw her again, those feelings he thought he had buried resurfaced with a rush. Diep was no longer the innocent, carefree girl he remembered. She had grown into a strong, independent woman, forced to shoulder the responsibilities of her family. She had stopped waiting for him, and her heart no longer had room for him. Diep still lived in the small house with her mother and younger brother. Life had been difficult for them, but she had worked hard to take care of her family, putting the past behind her. She had once loved James deeply. But after he left without a word of explanation, she had learned to stand on her own. It had been hard and at times lonely, but she had come to terms with it. The love she had for James had faded, though perhaps it still lingered in some hidden corner of her heart. But she knew that love could no longer keep her tethered to a past that was gone. James knew that his return to the village wasn't just about the canal project. It was also about trying to reconnect with Diep. He understood the project would affect many families, including hers, and he wanted to find a way to help. But as he encountered her again, there was a palpable distance between them. The woman before him was not the girl he had known. Her cold demeanor and the way she avoided his gaze left him heartbroken. She no longer seemed like the person he had shared his dreams with, and his heart sank as he realized how much things had changed. "Are you doing well?" James asked, his voice hesitant. Diep didn't answer immediately. She simply nodded before turning back to her work. There was no smile, no warmth in her eyes. It was as if she didn't recognize him, or worse, as if she didn't want to. James felt the ache in his chest. The distance between them was too great now. The years and the silence had created a barrier he couldn't break down. "Still working in the fields?" James asked, trying again, hoping to spark some conversation to bridge the gap. "I have to. Life doesn't allow for dreams," Diep replied flatly, not looking at him. James felt a sharp pang of guilt and regret. He wanted to reach out, to tell her he was sorry for leaving, for not coming back sooner. But he knew it was too late. There was no going back, no undoing the hurt he had caused. "Do you think this project will help people?" James asked, trying to steer the conversation toward something they could both discuss rationally. Too Diep paused for a moment, her face thoughtful. The project? You're talking about taking our land to build a canal, right? I don't know if I can trust this. We've lived here for so long, and now you're asking us to give up our land. Do you think people will just accept that? James could hear the frustration in her voice, the pain she was trying to hide. He knew it wasn't just about the land. It was about the promises that had been broken, the dreams that had never been fulfilled. But he also knew that the project was necessary, not just for him, but for the future of the entire village. It would bring benefits, but at a cost that he wasn't sure he could fully explain to her. They stood in silence for a long moment, neither of them sure of what to say next. James understood that Too Diep was right to be upset. She had every right to question the changes that were being thrust upon her, and he had no easy answers. The project would bring progress, but it would also disrupt lives like hers. As James and Too Diep grappled with the tension between them, there was another person in the background, someone who played an important role in Too Diep's life. Tung, James's childhood friend, had secretly harbored feelings for Too Diep for years. Although he never openly expressed them, he had always wanted to protect her, to be there for her in her time of need. Tung knew that she wasn't likely to accept his feelings, but that didn't stop him from quietly supporting her. He often helped her with farm work, brought her food, and provided a shoulder to lean on when she needed it. Over time, the bond between Tung and Too Diep grew stronger. They weren't in love in the passionate sense, but there was a deep sense of companionship between them. Tung understood her in a way that no one else did. He didn't try to force anything. He simply offered her the kind of quiet presence that allowed her to heal, to move forward with her life. They spent long hours talking about their hopes and dreams, and sometimes about the past they both wished they could forget. James noticed the growing closeness between them. He wasn't jealous, but there was a subtle unease that crept into his heart. It wasn't the idea of Too Diep moving on that bothered him. It was the fear that she would forget everything they had shared. He knew that she was finding comfort in Tung's company, but he also knew that this wasn't the kind of love she had once shared with him. Tung was there for her in ways James could never be, and perhaps that was exactly what she needed now. One evening, as James and Tung sat together, discussing the progress of the project, Tung suddenly asked, "Do you think Too Diep still loves you?" James shook his head, a heavy sigh escaping his lips. "No, she's changed, and so have I." Tung didn't respond right away. He understood. Sometimes, love was just not enough to overcome the passage of time, and people changed. The bond they once shared couldn't be easily rekindled, no matter how much either of them wished it. In the end, James made the difficult decision to leave the village. He realized that he couldn't hold onto the past forever. He needed to move forward to focus on the future. He returned to the city, leaving behind the village, the project, and the girl he had once loved. Too Diep, meanwhile, stayed in the village with Tung. Their relationship deepened, not in the passionate way that James had once hoped, but in a way that felt more real, more grounded in the present. As time passed, Diep found peace with the changes in her life. She didn't need to be defined by the past, nor did she need to wait for a love that had already passed. Tung remained by her side, and although their bond wasn't filled with romantic passion, it was built on a foundation of mutual respect and care. They faced the challenges of life together, knowing that sometimes love didn't have to be a grand, sweeping thing. It could simply be the quiet support of someone who understood you. And in the end, that was enough.